Nintendo has been acting very, very odd recently, and I just need to talk about all of it because they are making so many mistakes. There are so many big problems that really don't need to be as big as they are, and just very controversial things that have come out of this company within the past couple of weeks. First thing that we need to talk about is their lack of communication with us, the audience, and the people who are going to keep them in business. It is very frustrating to see, and I made a video about this earlier this year talking about their lack of communication, and this is more of a problem than ever. And the biggest issue here is that in the past couple of years, we all were very accepting of Nintendo in the way that they were releasing their games because we were actually very impressed, at least I was, at the amount of games that they continued to release for the Nintendo Switch at the tail end of that console's life. I mean, even in the very last year of that console, we got a brand new take on a Princess Peach game, we got Thousand Year Door, we got Mario and Luigi Brothership, the first Mario and Luigi game on the console, and the first one in over a decade. We were then able to get Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition and a new Donkey Kong game. There were a lot of different games, and yet they were all very small games, and so we assumed within the last couple of years, okay, they are backing off. All of the developers are working on Nintendo Switch 2 games, and all of the massive games are going to be announced and released within the first couple years of that console's life. And I think we were all so willing to accept their schedule and the way we were able to get these games, even though they were a lot smaller scale games, because of how the Nintendo Switch 2 was right around the corner. We knew their next console was coming soon and that they wanted to develop games for that, while also not abandoning the Nintendo Switch audience and the 153 million people that own Nintendo Switches. And so as we look forward to the future and as we looked to the Nintendo Switch 2, we all anticipated that these big games were coming, that Tears of the Kingdom level games, Mario Odyssey level games, Smash Bros., Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion. We assumed all of these big IPs were coming down the pipe, and all we had to do was be patient for a brand new generation, because who wouldn't assume that after 2017 and the Nintendo Switch's legendary first year, in which we got ourselves Breath of the Stinkin' Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, Splatoon 2, Mario Odyssey, we got Fire Emblem Warriors, we got Xenoblade Chronicles 2, we got so many games in that first year, and even into 2018, sure, it was a lot more disappointing in terms of output, but we got ourselves a brand new Mario Party that returned back to form. We got Smash Brothers at the end of the year, we got a whole bunch of ports, we got Mario Tennis, we got all kinds of games in 2018, and now, as we look at this year, we are still getting a lot of games, and I held the position for quite a while that we did not need a June Direct, we did not need a Summer July Direct, and we ended up not getting a general Nintendo Direct, and that is still true, I think. I think that is still very true, that we did not need a Nintendo Direct this summer, because all of the games that we know are coming this year, we just know they're coming, we just don't know when they're coming. We have no idea when Kirby Air Riders is coming, when Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is coming. We don't know when Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment is coming. The list goes on and on of games that have been announced without release dates. And we know these games are probably going to be coming this year, but the fact that they have not told us when is extremely, extremely abnormal for Nintendo. They want to make sure that when they are marketing these games, that they have plenty of time to do so. And the holidays are coming quicker and quicker and earlier and earlier. Kit and Krista were talking on their podcast about how the internal Nintendo outlook for these games is that we want to market them earlier and earlier, because as the September and October and November months start to come, people are starting to buy earlier and earlier for Black Friday, for Christmas, for all of the holidays. They try to get those games bought, they try to get everything they need bought, and then they bring it back home. And the statistics really do show that the earlier you release a game towards that holiday season and the earlier you start to market them and get people hyped up for it, is the earlier that your game is going to succeed. And internally, I can only imagine, this is my guess here, that they are only waiting because they don't know which games are going to go where. They have no idea yet which games are going to be done when they need to be and which ones are going to slide into these time slots. Because early in the year, we have had a pretty decent schedule so far, and to be honest, looking back in retrospect, I think we will say this was a solid first year, and we all have to remember, most first years of any consoles ever are not good. No, normally, we only get like 2 big games in a year of a new console, and that is if we're lucky. 2017 was a complete and total aberration. Most of the time, you get a big launch game and a big holiday game, and that's it. And sometimes the console launches during the holiday, and so you barely get 2 big games within the first year of a console. And whether we like it or not, those two big games have already released. We got Mario Kart World, a huge launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. Regardless of how you or I feel about the online situation, how that game was ruined, it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. Why? Because it's Nintendo, and this is a Mario Kart game, and it launched with their brand new system, a piece of hardware that is outselling every other console in its lifespan ever. In terms of this amount of time it has had to sell, it is the fastest selling console ever. Within the first 7 weeks of this console's lifespan, it has sold 6 million units. As of June, the console sold 5.82 million consoles and has 8.6 million pieces of software sold. Oh my goodness. And if you want to know the biggest, most baffling part of all of this, something that we should have all seen coming, something that I knew was going to happen and yet could never have predicted it to be this big, Mario Kart World sold 5.63 million units in that same time frame. That means that 97% of people who bought Nintendo Switch 2s also bought Mario Kart World or got the Mario Kart World bundle. That is an obscene amount. That is a ridiculous attach rate for people to have bought Switches and then to have gotten Mario Kart. That is a number that Nintendo has got to be celebrating internally. It is the biggest attach rate I have ever seen. So like it or not, Mario Kart is that big title, and it will continue to sell. Now, it will continue to have controversy until they continue to try and fix this game, or if they just don't fix it, and people continue to be upset with the way the online goes. And yet there are still people who claim and say this game is not ruined. It is still great, and it is still very fun. But that $80 price point is controversy enough, even if there weren't any problems with the actual game experience itself. This is one of those big titles that you would normally get at launch or at holiday. Then we have Donkey Kong Bonanza. And we have no idea how well this game has sold yet, not a single hint of sales release dates or anything like that. We have nothing for this game, and yet this game is special. This is the big tentpole title that a new console needs. This game holds up the Switch 2 all on its own, and people have been playing it and raving about it like crazy. It is giving everyone banana syndrome. We all need some Donkey Kong in our lives, and this game delivers on every front. It is phenomenal in every way. It's everything a new generation game could ever give you. It is so amazing. Then on the horizon, we have a bunch of games for this year. We know that we are going to have Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We know we're going to have Kirby Air Riders for 2025. We know Pokemon is coming out in October for both the Switch 1 and a Switch 2 edition alongside of that. That is going to probably be our holiday game. We know Splatoon Raiders is on the horizon, but we don't know when it's coming, even though there have been some rumors and maybe even leaks of this game coming in this year. We know that game is still coming. We know that we have ourselves Drag and Drive. We have so many games coming. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is another one, a Switch 2 edition of that game. And I'm sure there are more games coming, maybe even smaller Shadow Drop type announcements that we're going to get from the big N, especially considering it's Mario's 40th anniversary. And the last time we hit that milestone 35, that big 5 number, it was a huge year for Mario. So maybe we're going to get a bunch of Mario information towards September. And yet, we still don't know the release dates for a lot of these games, and so many of them are just up in the air in our smaller projects. You look at Kirby Air Riders, it's just a niche game. It's a smaller game that not a lot of people are going to buy, and sure, Sakurai's name is right next to it, and so maybe people are going to check it out because of that, and I'm sure it's going to be very intricate, and the game is going to be amazing. It's going to play very, very well, and yet it's not going to sell how people anticipate because it's a Kirby Air Riders game. Then we've got Metroid Prime 4, yet another very niche series, a series that has not hit over 3 million units sold in any of its games except for Metroid Dread. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a Switch 2 edition game. It is an old game. Pokemon is going to get a Switch 2 edition, so that means it's going to be on the Nintendo Switch and is not technically a Switch 2 exclusive, even if it will run and play better on the Switch 2, and people on the Switch 2 will buy it definitely over the Switch 1 version, but still, it is still a Pokemon game that is not exclusive to this console. Then we have Dragon Drive, which is a very weird experimental type of game in which you're using the mouse functionality of both Joy-Con 2 to play as a wheelchair basketball man. And honestly, it looks like a fun tech demo, and I think a lot of people will have a lot of fun with it, and it is only $20. So there you go. Everyone complaining Nintendo does not price their games how they should. ARMS was $60 and still sold over 3 million units. This game should sell decently well, but it's another niche game. It's nothing to get entirely excited over. Age of Imprisonment. Zelda, sure, it is a Zelda game technically, but it is a Warriors style game. It's not from the actual Zelda team, even though it does tell a canonical story. It's not a real Zelda game. It is just a spin-off, and yet people are going to love it. I am going to love it. I'm going to eat that game up, trust me. But it is not a big game. We have yet to have another big game for this year, and people are just a little bit baffled by that, and I am as well, because the Switch 2 has been in development for so long, and both Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza were initially supposed to be Switch 1 games. Neither of them were supposed to be on this console, so that tells me that they were developing other games for this console that we have not seen yet. We have not yet seen a game. Let me really get this through your head here. We have not yet seen a game for the Switch 2 that was not initially developed for the Switch 1 and moved over for development for this console. We don't know a single game yet that was made specifically for the Switch 2, and I would not be surprised if Splatoon Raiders was initially going to be a Switch 1 game. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment we know was confirmed to have been on the Switch, and then they moved it over to the Switch 2. All of these games are either from very, very small niche franchises that only core Nintendo fans would truly love. They're Switch 2 editions like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and Pokemon ZA and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, all Switch 2 editions that you're going to be able to either play on the Switch 1 or have been out for years, like in Kirby's instance. Dragon Drive is a new IP in which no one is super excited about. Are you sensing a trend here? None of these games are all that exciting. And I really don't want to complain here because Donkey Kong Bonanza is amazing. And if that game had been the holiday game, I would see this as a big win. I would see it as a much better schedule for them to release that. And I think they wanted to release it closer to the launch of this console so that way people would go out and have reasons to buy this. And they really are probably copying that initial Switch 1 model where they released Breath of the Wild, a big game, a huge, amazing game, and then a month later, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe hit the platform. Two of the biggest and best games this console would ever have to offer came within the first 2 months, and it kept hype going. It kept people wanting to buy. And of course, that was a different time frame because it was March to April, and then the summer months kicked in and we had Splatoon, and then all of the amazing games hit during the holiday season. This is a little bit of a shorter timeline, knowing that this console launched in early June and now it is early August, so it's technically only been about 2 months. In 2 months, we have gotten 2 amazing, phenomenal games, and I am just a little bit disappointed that moving forward, we don't know any other big titles. And I know they're going to tell us, and I know we're going to know eventually, but it's just odd because coming off of those last 2 years of the Nintendo Switch, we were all a little bit more accepting of those games not being up to par, not being huge system sellers, not being big IPs, because we knew they were probably working on all those for the next console. And yet, now here we are in the first year. We got a new Mario Kart, amazing, a new Donkey Kong, amazing. But we don't know anything else, and maybe I'm being impatient, maybe everyone's being impatient, but it seems as though this schedule is not where it should be for Nintendo. Nintendo is not communicating to us the way they should, even with the games that we have right now. I would be fine if this was all we had for the rest of the year and a September Direct showed us what was coming for the next year, or at least for what was coming for the early parts of next year. But the fact that there is no release dates for these games, the fact that we're still in limbo for some of these games like Metroid Prime 4, which we have been waiting for since 2017 and we still don't know the release date, and they're saying it's coming out in 2025, and yet we can't believe them yet, can we? Because this game has been delayed so many times. It has been rated in a couple of different countries, so we know it's probably coming soon, but it's just baffling that they refuse to tell us when. And yes, they will probably release some sort of overview or release date trailer on Nintendo Today some random day. They'll drop it on that app that everyone already forgot about and no one truly uses. But still, I think it is unfortunate that they have waited this long and have not communicated to us in the way that they should have, and decided to release these specific games in this year. Kirby Air Riders feels like one of those games that would be coming in year 2 or 3, in which we're like, man, what a great surprise to supplement all of these other big games. Not necessarily one of the big games itself. It shouldn't be one of those games that holds up this console's life and is depending upon all of the people coming out to buy it to keep this console going. It shouldn't be that, and yet I feel like Nintendo is treating it as such, and maybe that's because they want Sakurai to work on a new Smash Brothers game, but I still just think it's an odd choice. There are so many odd choices here that I am concerned about, and Nintendo has other big problems other than just these games. It is the elephant in the room. It is the biggest problem that we have been talking about since day one of this Nintendo Switch 2 hype train. It is the pricing, and they have increased their prices yet again for all of the hardware except for the Nintendo Switch 2 itself and the Switch 2 games and the Switch 1 games. The games and the Switch 2 hardware are not touched, but pretty much everything else has been impacted. We look now, we have a Switch Lite. It is now $230 from its initial $200, which was a steal of a deal. $230 is still a steal to play all of these amazing games, but still it is very frustrating for any of these prices to be going up at all. Then we have the Nintendo Switch, the base Switch model, going up from $300 to $340. Then we have the Nintendo Switch OLED, the top of the market Nintendo Switch 1 console, the console that people who don't want Switch 2s but do want to get into the Nintendo sphere would probably go for. This has been raised from $350 to $400. Now, the OLED screen is probably still the best screen amongst all of these Switches. Even Switch 2 cannot beat that OLED screen. It is very similar in my opinion, but the OLED is definitely better. And yet, it is only $50 cheaper than the Switch 2, which can run all of these games 10 times better and will obviously have way more brand new games in the future to come. And so if you are thinking about buying a Switch or a Switch 2, at this point, with that price raise, go ahead and buy a Switch 2. It's $50 extra just to get a next generation leap. But unfortunately, that is not all of the price increases that we have to go over here. The Switch 1, all of these accessories got a boost in price. The original Joy-Con went from $80 to $90. The Pro Controller went from $70 to $80. NES controllers went from $60 to $70. N64 went from $50 to $55. And the SNES controller went from $30 to $35. Now, what's very interesting about these pricing here with the Joy-Con and the Pro Controller is the difference in between the Switch 1 and Switch 2. The Switch 2 is getting a bunch of price increases for these accessories as well. The Joy-Con charging stand for the Switch 2 goes from $30 to $35, the Pro Controller goes from $85 to $90, Joy-Con 2 from $95 to $100, and the dock from $120 to $125. Now, there is only a $5 increase here in price for the Pro Controller for the Switch 2 and then the Joy-Con 2 compared to the Switch 1's $10 leap for both of those, and you might be saying, why is that? Well, there are a bunch of reasons I could see people theorizing why, but the main reason is that they had already increased these prices from their initial launch. After the April 2nd Direct, we got ourselves a bunch of information about the Nintendo Switch 2 and the accessories and the pricing from that because there was a huge tariff situation that went down in April, and it was right after the Direct, and people were worried if the Switch 2 price would go even higher and the games would have to go higher because the prices were already a big talking point, and that was very frustrating for a lot of people to see the prices go up even more, and Nintendo has very selectively rose these prices up higher and higher, and yet they've not touched the Switch 2 or the games themselves. They just increased the accessories and everything surrounding the gaming console without actually touching the console itself. And I think that is a brilliant decision, and this decision here to increase all of these other things is probably to protect themselves from having to increase the price of the Switch 2 itself, but I will get into that in a little bit. But now it is making sense to see why there is a difference between a $5 increase for these Switch 2 accessories, but a $10 increase for the Switch 1. The Switch 1 had not been touched with that initial tariff situation, but the Switch 2 stuff already went up, so now we're at a net gain of $10 for Nintendo and $10 loss for us. Next up here, they increased a couple of other things in terms of pricing. The Amiibo that were initially $16, which I believe back in the day were like 15 or 14, they are 16. They are now up to $20 a pop. 10-year-old Amiibo, up to $20, my friends. 2-pack Amiibos went from $35 to $40 depending on which ones, but they originally were about $30 to make up for that 15 and 15. And then the Nintendo Sound Clock Alarmo. I still have one and love one and might make a video on it, but it was $100 and it is now $110. And that is very, very unfortunate for something that probably did not sell all that well to begin with. So now we have our problems with these games, and now we have problems with the pricing. The price has increased again, but the Switch 2 itself is not touched. The games themselves are not touched, and that is a big win heading into this generation even further. But looking backwards, this is a new precedent being set by Nintendo to increase the price of your old hardware, of your old accessories. Why in the world would Nintendo want to do this, you might be asking? Well, I have what I believe to be the answer to that question. It's because they don't want to raise the price of the Switch 2 and the Switch 2 games. They know the backlash that they really got back in April and really are continuing to get with more and more games coming out, but Mario Kart being $80 specifically was a big burden on so many people's minds, and it really slashed the company in half in terms of how many people thought that they were trying to do things for our good. And I know a lot of people will say it's ridiculous to ever think a company has your interest in mind, but I really do think Nintendo is different compared to other companies here. They do care about the consumer a little bit more than some of those other companies. They don't have microtransactions within all of their games. The developers actually care about making good experiences, and they care about the player experience. And so I think they take that into account when they really make some of these business decisions, at least half the time. But the reason is tariffs are unfortunate, and they are being imposed on all these different countries to where the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch 1s are going to have to be manufactured, and all of these accessories have to be manufactured and shipped out as well, and Nintendo is probably losing a chunk of cash by just keeping the price the same on all of these things. And I guarantee you, from all of the tariff situation right now, $450 for the Switch 2 is barely breaking even for them. So everything that they sell here is not going well in terms of profit, and that is not normally what they like to do. They like to get as much profit out of the console itself, so where every single person buys a console, they are getting money just from that console. But other companies like to do it to where they'll sell their console at a little bit of a loss and then make all of that money back once you buy a bunch of games and continue to invest within that gaming sphere. But Nintendo, like I said, they do not like to do that approach. They like to make profits on every single bit of their hardware, on their consoles, on their games, on everything. They like to make profit, and that makes sense to an extent. But now with these tariffs, I think their initial pricing for the Switch 2 being $450 for no bundle and $500 for the Mario Kart bundle, they are now seeing that these tariffs are probably making that go down to even, or maybe even taking a little bit of a loss, which each console sold. Now, I think they are trying to avoid raising that Switch 2 price as much as possible, because that would lead to a massive stink. Because sure, people are upset that the Switch 1 is rising in price and that all of these other things are rising in price as well, and they're almost a decade old at this point, and yet it's going up and not down, and you would think Nintendo would want it to go down so people could buy more of it, but that's just not what they're doing, and so it is very unfortunate. But I think the reason that they're doing this is to keep the Switch 2 from going up, is to keep the Switch 2 games from going up. They want to make sure that if you are going to buy anything from Nintendo, from their hardware, from their games, anything at all, that they are making a profit off of all of those things except for the Switch 2 and the Switch 2 games. If you are buying Amiibo, if you are buying literally any of these things, they want to make a profit so that way they can help put that money back into the Switch 2 production until the economy gets a little bit more stable in terms of what these tariffs are going to mean long term and how these relationships with other countries are going to pan out. Now, the very unfortunate thing is that even if the economy does get better and all of these tariff situations go away, I kind of doubt that they'll ever go back and reverse these decisions. These prices are probably going to stay the same for a while. Now, maybe a year or two from now, if things do settle down, the Switch 1 will go back to where it should be. But I just really doubt that all these other accessories are going to go down, especially for the Switch 2 stuff. Once they see that people are just going to buy it no matter what they price it at, why would they ever try to change that? But it is a big conundrum nonetheless, because Nintendo cannot keep doing this. And even if tariffs get worse, if the economy gets worse, if everything else continues to go in a downward trend here, Nintendo can't increase these prices continuously. They just can't. Eventually, it's going to hit a point where people don't buy it. And if people continue to buy it, well, then it means that Nintendo can keep raising it, I guess. But it's going to eventually hit a breaking point where the average consumer does not buy a Switch 2. Now, these sales numbers that I showed you earlier are indicative of people caring and wanting Switch 2s, and I think that momentum will carry itself throughout the rest of the year into the holiday season, but into early 2026, we will have to see how many of those people, how many of those casual fans that really don't know much about games, that bought a Switch for their Stardew Valley indie games or whatever, Animal Crossing people, maybe they will buy a Switch 2 just to go out of their way to get these games, but it's going to be close. It's going to be very, very close in how many people look at that price and say, I think I'm good. I think I've got my Switch OLED. I think I've got my Animal Crossing Switch. I think I've got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I've got Smash Ultimate. I've got Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've got all these games. Why do I want to buy a $450 console and spend $70 to $80 on your new games? The thing that hurts the most to me personally is the amiibo. Like, I love amiibo, and I have been collecting them forever, and I obviously do not have every single one, but I do have a lot of them. And so every now and then, whenever I've got a little bit of extra cash and I want some more amiibo, I'll go to the Nintendo store, see what they've got in stock, and just get a couple more. And usually I'll buy 1, 2, or 3 to get that $30 to $40 price range. And now that's just so much more money. It's $5 more for these amiibo, and I know they said 16, but at one point they were definitely 14 to 15. So that price has increased over the years as well. And amiibo have just been so profitable for Nintendo, and so many people will continue to buy these figures, but they've made so much money off of these amiibo. And I know people are always going to say like, oh, I wish they'd give us a break, right? But they're a company. I'm never going to come on here and say they should give us a break. That's ridiculous. Like, it's not their job to give us a break. It's their job to make money and make that bottom line better. And our job is to say whether or not we are going to shell out the money to buy these games. And my job is to buy these things, is to buy the Switch 2 and buy these games and talk about them on here because I love doing it. And even if I didn't have this channel, I would still continue to buy these things because I love Nintendo. But I think we come to a breaking point with Amiibo, with the Alarmo, with all of these random things just continuing to go up in price. Nintendo is raising every single thing they can think of except for the Switch 2 itself, which is good because that shows that they're not trying to increase the price, they're not trying to make it worse for us. And yet eventually, I've got a sneaking suspicion by the end of this year, by early next year, if things don't improve or if they get worse, we might see something like a $25 increase on this console, $475 or $525 for a bundle. I think the games themselves are pretty safe. I mean, the worst we're gonna get is $80, but Donkey Kong Bonanza was $70, and that's like the best game ever made. So I can't imagine moving forward with some of these new first-party games we're going to have that $80 price point continue to be set. I can't imagine what they would think is worth $80 if Donkey Kong Bonanza is not. But if Mario Kart is, maybe it just has to do with IP recognizability, and Donkey Kong, this is his brand new game. This is the first time in 3D since the N64 days. Maybe that's what their pricing model is based on here, but it just doesn't really match up. Here is the last piece of controversy for today. We have ourselves the Nintendo keycard situation, and this is something that I'm going to be very frank with you. I don't get the pushback. Now, wait a minute, give me a minute. I want to explain myself here because I love buying games digitally now. I used to be physical only because I really enjoyed buying the boxes, having it, holding it, and then putting it into my console and just being able to immediately play it. And nowadays, things are different. With my PS5, I can no longer really do that, even if I have a physical copy of the game, because I put it in and it needs a download, and it's not the actual game itself on the disc. And with the Switch, I loved buying things physically because I could just put it in and boom, that's the game. You put it in, you download maybe an update or two for the software itself, but not the game itself is being downloaded. And so you would just play it whenever you wanted. But the thing that really started to bother me as I started to rack up so many different games was putting them in and out over and over again. And on the go is not very fun with my Nintendo Switch or Switch 2 to have to carry a bunch of cartridges with me, because if I am just wanting to play a random game, and by the way, whenever I am on vacation or anywhere where I am taking my Switch with me, I always have the weirdest urges to play the weirdest, most random games that I never seem to have the cartridge for. So, starting a couple years ago, I went exclusively digital, and I don't mind paying for the extra storage that I need to make that possible, and yet I just went all digital because it's so much more easy. It's so easier for me to just pick up my Switch 2 and play whatever game I want. Mario Kart World, already downloaded. Donkey Kong Bonanza, already there. It's just all right there. Now, these key cards are a very, very different story because people care a lot about physical games and this is where the argument comes in, game preservation. Game key cards are not unique to Nintendo. They just were given a specific name so that people could understand what they were versus regular games. And PlayStation 5, Xbox, all of these other consoles and all of these other games have their own version of this type of thing, to where you're not exactly buying the entire game, you're buying the rights to download the game. Even buying physically now with the Nintendo Switch, I'm pretty sure there is a thing in which it's saying you do not own the game. It's not yours. You are buying a license to own the game, and at any point they can decide it's no longer yours. You don't get access to it anymore. You are done. And they have been doing that with people who are pirating their games or doing illegal activities on the Nintendo Switch 2 by just bricking the console and making it to where you are not allowed to use it. Game key cards have been a big thing, but there was just a Nintendo Direct partner showcase last week in which there were a ton of new games announced and released, and a bunch of them were game keycards, and I see Madden 26 as a game keycard, Persona 3 Reload as a game keycard. A bunch of these games are going to be game keycards. Even Pac-Man Repack 2, something that I would never have guessed would need to be more than just 64 gigabytes on that cartridge, but no one seems to be able to compress their games like Nintendo can. Cartridges are capped out at 64 gigabytes. There are no more space on these cartridges for you to put your game on. And so if you don't want to go through all the trouble of trying to compress your game below 64 gigabytes, or if you know it's impossible for your game to fit on that cartridge, Nintendo wanted to give those third-party developers with stronger, beefier games now for the Switch 2 the option to give physical releases without having to force themselves to put in 64 gigabytes of space. And so now these developers are able to use this as a physical means to release their games, so they can put it in stores, people can get them physically and be able to play them how they normally would, except the difference is you're just essentially buying a glorified download code. You put in your game key card and boom, you download the game and that is your game. Now, you still need to have the cartridge itself, I believe. It's a digital download essentially, but you are still using it as if it was a physical release, and so you're putting the key card into there, and then, boom, you have to download the rest, and the only way to play it is, I believe, putting the key card in and out of the Switch. And so with all of these other third-party games, such as Cyberpunk 2077, a massive open-world game in which people could not believe fit on the cartridge itself, CD Projekt Red, the studio behind Cyberpunk 2077, went out of their way to make sure this was the best experience for Nintendo Switch 2 players, and that they were able to buy it completely and totally physically. And people now have very, very few excuses to not be able to compress their game down to 64 gigabytes like Madden. Like, why does Madden have to have a game keycard? That is just, it's ridiculous to me. You could definitely compress that down even further. If a game like Cyberpunk is able to somehow be only 64, Madden should be able to be 64 as well. And Persona 3 Reload is a little bit shocking to me as well. I don't fully understand the reasons why these companies are not able to put them on regular physical hardware like they could with the Nintendo Switch back in the day, but now it's just a little bit different, and they want to make it to where it's easier for these companies to not have to squish all of their stuff onto a single cartridge and not have to put in multiple cartridges if that was the case. And so now here we are with game keycards, and people are mad. People are so mad because you're essentially buying a digital game with a physical cartridge, and yet it is not a physical game. This is where my opinion starts to come in a little stronger, because I just don't understand why people are so frustrated at this. I think it makes sense, in my opinion, to say, okay, I am a company that does not want to have to worry about putting every single thing on this 64 gigabyte cartridge, and so Nintendo is giving us the options to continue to release games physically, because otherwise I don't know if I would have been able to sell it physically. And sometimes with games, physically is the best way to get your game out there. People see them on store shelves and they'll give it a shot, but maybe on the eShop they don't care as much as they would if they see that physical cartridge and that physical case. And there is something special about buying games that you really love physically. I still agree with that. If I didn't have this channel and I wasn't trying to get my games as quickly as possible and I didn't care about convenience in my everyday life, I would still absolutely still be buying physical games, but now I am pretty much exclusively digital on my Switch 2. Now, here's the thing. I understand that people are frustrated because they appreciate physical cartridges and they appreciate physical copies of these games and having the cases and the artwork and all that. But the thing is that you're not missing out on any of that. You're still getting yourself a cartridge. You're still getting yourself a case and the art and the spine and just everything that comes with a physical release. You're still getting all that. So you're not missing out on anything. And the only difference is that you have to download it because it is not all on the cartridge itself. Because these companies are not willing or able to put them all on these cartridges, because Nintendo somehow, some way is able to compress their games down to really insane sizes. I mean, Donkey Kong Bonanza, I'm pretty sure, is only like 7 gigabytes, and that game is massive. How in the world could they make it that small? It's unfathomable. And yet other companies are not able to do the same things, or they just aren't willing to try to do that. So this is a kind of middle ground answer here, because companies want to release their games on the Switch 2 and they want them to also be released physically. But the way the Switch is, the way it's also portable, it has to be cartridges, it can't be discs, so they can't make as much space on these things for their games. So what is the compromise here? Well, we want physical releases, the people want physical releases, so now here is Nintendo giving that option to the consumer and to the companies themselves. Put it on a 64 gigabyte cartridge, make it a regular physical release, or put it on a game key card if you are are scared that you're not able to make it all on the same cartridge. And another reason I think people could be upset at these game key cards is the idea of preservation, the idea of what do I own, what do I not own? Well, here's the newsflash for you. This is not a Nintendo problem. This is simply a third-party problem. Nintendo themselves have released every single first-party game physically on their own cartridges, and if Mario Kart World is only 20-some gigabytes, and if Donkey Kong Bonanza is only 7-some gigabytes, then I guarantee you there will not be another Nintendo Switch 2 game that is necessary for Nintendo to use a game key card. It's all going to be physically on the cartridge itself. This option is exclusively for those third-party developers that aren't able or willing to put in the effort to put in a 64-gigabyte cartridge. So what is the problem here, right? Nintendo is just giving us and the companies more options, and yet they're being accused of setting the industry back, of following suit in this horrible preservation issue. And I don't think that they really are. Now, maybe there is some big argument that I am missing here. There's some big thing that I just do not see. But from my vantage point, the third-party companies are just doing what they have to do to get their cartridges out there, to get the physical copies out there, and to try to find some sort of middle ground here for the consumer. And the consumer, I don't understand why you would be upset. Maybe you prefer physical games. Okay, cool. Well, if you want a physical game, go get that. Just go get it, and that's physically it. That's it. What else do you care about other than it just being a hunk of plastic? That's all it is anyways. Why do you care if it's a download code if the game couldn't have been possible to fit on a cartridge anyways? In terms of game preservation, again, this isn't a Nintendo thing. This is an industry-wide thing. Go talk to the industry about this. Go talk to all these other companies that are doing this, because Nintendo did not invent this concept. They just gave it a cute little name because they wanted people to understand what they were buying. So from my vantage point, I don't get it. I personally do not get it at all. If I were to buy any of these games physically, I would not mind to do that. I wouldn't care, because it's simply just the only way I can buy it. And maybe I would prefer it to be physical because, yeah, it's right there and I don't have to wait to sit through that download. But once that download is done, once that initial download is done, it's on there. And every time I put it in there, it's as if it was a physical game. So I truly don't get it. I don't get it. And maybe it's a game preservation thing. Maybe it's people just really love physical and they're going out of their way to say that digital is worse just because they prefer physical, I guess. But I don't see a valid argument here in which people are genuinely this mad for. I don't see anything that is warranting all of this outrage and hate. And I would really like to start a discussion here. I mean, if people can go down into the comments and tell me what it is about this that is so enraging, what I'm missing, if there's anything I'm not covering, please, by all means, I would love to hear that. But I don't have that opinion in me right now, so I just want to say thank you so much for watching this entire video. There were a lot of news things to cover and it ended up being a very long one, but make sure you let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. Do these game releases worry you? Do the release dates worry you? Do the prices worry you? What about the game key cards is so upsetting? Let me know all of that and more down below in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. Click that notification bell if you want to know exactly when I upload all of my videos, and consider joining my membership program for a bunch of perks like early access to all of my videos and a Discord server. Click on the left side of your screen if you want to see my breakdown of the new Age of Imprisonment trailer we got from that Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, and click on the right side of your screen if you want to see what happened with the most recent Mario Kart World update and why it's not entirely fixed. Thank you so much for making it to the end. You make sure you have yourself a phenomenal day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.